You open your bank app. You stare at the numbers. You close it quickly, as if hiding your eyes will make the balance change. That small gesture tells me everything. It tells me there is a split inside you. One part likes to believe you are above money. Another part wakes up at night worrying about bills. You tell friends you don't care about money, while your chest tightens when a payment is due. I have watched this pattern enough times to call it a mindset. It is not simple indifference. It is avoidance dressed as virtue. It is a protection mechanism that pretends not to need what it secretly fears losing. I want to dismantle that mechanism for you. I will show you how the mind builds a story that stops practical action. I will show you how that story convinces reality to match it. And I will show you the exact moments where people break the pattern. You might be thinking, that is not me. You might be thinking, I really do value other things more than money. Hold that thought. There is a difference between a value and a defense. In the next section, I will do the full diagnostic. I will describe how this person sees themselves and how they behave. I will give concrete scenes you will recognize. Stay with me, because what looks like spiritual freedom often hides a slow, silent collapse. The question is simple. Are you pretending not to care about money, or are you protecting yourself from a fear you refuse to name? That little gesture of closing the app is the opening line of the report I would write if I could hand you a transcript of your inner economy. It is small and ordinary. It is also a symptom. When someone does that over and over, I start cataloging patterns. I listen for the stories they repeat. I watch how they handle small windfalls. I note how they speak about people who have money. From those data points, a clear profile emerges. First, they like to present themselves as spiritually or morally superior. They say things like, I value experiences over things, or I prefer purpose to profit. Those phrases are not wrong. They are noble sentiments. But in this group, those phrases serve a function. They soothe a part that feels shame about scarcity. They justify inaction. They become scripts you use to avoid looking at numbers, making plans, or asking for what you deserve. Saying, I don't care, becomes a ritual that saves you from facing pain. But rituals have costs. Second, their behavior betrays the script. They avoid statements about future finances. They ignore emails from banks. They delay simple tasks like setting a budget. When bills arrive, they feel a spike of shame and then push the problem away with distraction. They buy things impulsively that quickly relieve anxiety. Those purchases are not generous expressions of freedom. They are escape acts. The momentary relief confirms their inner story. Money is a problem. That confirmation strengthens the habit. To understand this fully, we need to separate two narratives. One is the social narrative you speak out loud. The other is the private narrative you cling to in the dark. The social narrative sounds enlightened. It draws admiration. The private narrative feels wounded. It is full of rules like, if I want money, I will become corrupt, or rich people got lucky or cheated. Those rules live under the surface. They organize choice without your consent. I watch people use moral language to defend a pattern that is essentially fearful. They talk about not being materialistic while their bank accounts erode. They preen about living simply while their credit card balance climbs. This is not hypocrisy in the usual moral sense. It is a survival strategy. It asks the world to maintain a story it refuses to negotiate with reality. What does that look like in everyday life? Consider a typical month. You receive your paycheck. You feel a brief gratitude. Then you remember how money corrupts, or how, I don't want to be that kind of person. You decide to treat yourself. You buy a nice dinner or an expensive coaching call. The purchase numbs something. The month goes on. You forget to move money into savings or to set aside for bills. A notice arrives. You feel shame. You promise to change. You do not. The cycle repeats. The problem compounds. Now think about opportunities. A job opens with a higher salary. Your first reaction is not to evaluate the offer. It is to ask, will taking this job make me less authentic? That question, framed as moral concern, is often a disguised fear. Fear of responsibility. fear of becoming the person you were taught to distrust. So you hesitate. The opportunity passes. You carry evidence that aligns with your belief. Money escaped me again. Your inner script is reinforced. This pattern also colors relationships. When you need help, you avoid asking. You tell yourself you do not want to be indebted to others. That seems noble, but when a friend offers a loan, you feel humiliation more than gratitude. You interpret the offer as judgment. That feeling grows into a secret resentment. You withdraw. The relationship cools. So you pay with more isolation. You interpret that isolation as proof that your way is right. The loop keeps tightening. On the surface, the vocabulary of this group is full of higher truths. They speak about energy, abundance, and spiritual alignment. They quote metaphors about surrendering to the universe. In private, their inner voice repeats a different litany. I will be okay if I starve my fear with noble words. This duality is crucial to understand. The public language obscures the practical neglect. The private narrative organizes behavior. This is where the mind hides the problem in plain sight. Now let me be specific about the mechanics. Your nervous system responds to money like any other threat. If childhood or early adult experiences taught you that money equals danger, your body learned to avoid it. Avoidance reduces immediate anxiety. That reward mechanism is powerful. It creates habit. Habits are efficient. They conserve energy, but they also automate a trajectory. Your nervous system wants to protect you from pain. It will use meaning-making strategies to justify the protection. Meaning matters. The stories you repeat daily are what I call your operating system. If the operating system says money is corrupt, you will make choices that prove it right. Your emotions and your decisions will align to produce outcomes that fit the story. The world responds to your consistent actions, not to your occasional declarations. This is the simple law at play. Let me give you a concrete, small story I heard recently. A woman I worked with used to say she could not be bothered with budgets. She had been raised to believe money was vulgar. At 40, she found herself taking out a small loan to cover an overdue mortgage. Her first reaction was to shame herself. Then she told herself she was free because she didn't worship money. She kept the old script for 2 more years. In that time, she missed chances to refinance and save. Finally, a month where bills came due and there was no buffer created a crisis. The crisis forced her to look at the numbers. She did not like what she saw, but being forced gave her a new kind of permission to change. She started by scheduling 2 minutes a day to look at her accounts. She kept that ritual for 3 months. The numbers did not change overnight. Her relationship with money did. That shift allowed her to take a consulting gig she had previously dismissed. Her income rose. Nothing mystical happened. She built new habits around a new story. But it started with a brutal moment of honesty. Moments like that are not rare. They are the thin places where the mask falls. And they are the exact moments when people choose one of 2 paths. One path is denial. You double down on the I don't care story. You invent new reasons. You become more righteous about your supposed detachment. That path usually produces more scarcity. The other path is responsibility. You admit you care. You trace the pattern. You make tiny, uncomfortable changes. You feel vulnerable. You learn. That path usually produces a different relationship with money. There is a social angle to this pattern that multiplies its effects. Many of the people in this zone belong to social groups that praise minimalism or spiritual detachment. Those groups reward certain language. They reward postures of disdain for conventional success. That social approval becomes currency. You are given social value for being a non-material person. That reward can be stronger than the discomfort of scarcity. So you learn to trade economic well-being for social praise. Over time, the trade shapes identity. You become the person who thinks of themselves as morally superior for failing to plan. Identity is sticky. It resists change because changing would mean losing part of yourself and the acceptance that comes with it. That is why shifting this pattern is always a psycho-spiritual project. It involves renegotiating who you are in your community. It involves tolerating they provide plausible reasons to keep the rule. Then there are emotions, shame, guilt, fear, and the desire for approval. Those emotions fuel avoidance behaviors. Finally, there are choices that look rational in the moment but are destructive long-term. Ignoring statements, impulse buys, rejecting opportunities. Understanding these layers matters because change requires unpicking them in order. You cannot simply decide to be rich. You cannot simply chant affirmations and expect your wiring to change. You must see the belief. You must notice the supporting narratives. You must feel the emotions without acting on them. And you must practice different choices until they become habitual. One practical image I use is the attic. Your conscious mind is the living room. Your hidden beliefs are in the attic. You visit the living room every day. The attic is dusty. You avoid it. But the attic leaks. The leak affects your floors. Ignoring the leak is not spiritual virtue. It is a maintenance problem. The work is not glamorous. It is small. It is routine. It is painfully ordinary. And yet it changes how your whole house functions. So how does this person respond to windfalls? The typical response is either to spend quickly to avoid thinking about permanence, or to hoard ineffectively, refusing to let money circulate because of fear it will corrupt you. Both options produce the same result. Money does not build safety. It signals scarcity. Scarcity creates more fear. The loop continues. How do they respond to success in others? They either critique it harshly as evidence of corruption, or they compare themselves and feel ashamed. Neither reaction helps. Both reactions are defense. They shield a fragile sense of self. The most honest reaction is curiosity, coupled with a willingness to learn. But curiosity is hard when identity is invested in resistance. There is a deeper spiritual problem I often see. The person confuses detachment with denial. Detachment is an ability to use resources without being owned by them. Denial is refusal to see facts to protect self-image. Detachment requires presence. Denial requires absence. They look similar to others. They feel different to you. If you are practicing denial, it is because you are avoiding a painful truth. If you are practicing detachment, you have looked at the truth and decided intentionally. At this point you might ask, is balance possible? Yes. The work is to move from denial to skillful detachment. That requires both inner clarity and outer competence. It requires learning basic financial skills and also examining the beliefs that make those skills feel unsafe. That is the double path. I want to close this section with another small portrait. I coached a man who had been proud of his non-material stance for years. He had a modest income and a large network that validated his philosophy. After a health emergency, he found himself unable to cover expenses. The emergency made his stance brittle. He could no longer avoid reality. The thing that saved him was a tiny practice he adopted reluctantly. He started writing a one-line financial log every evening. 2 minutes. He wrote what he earned and what he spent. He refused to moralize it. He just recorded. That small log revealed patterns. It showed where money leaked. He adjusted. Over a year, his stress dropped. He did not become a different person overnight. He simply stopped being at war with the facts. The war had been the last thing keeping his scarcity alive. This is the essence of what I want you to see. The story you tell about money is not harmless. It creates a trajectory. It organizes perception. It invites confirmations. If you want different results, you must change the story and the habits that animate it. The next section will show the 4 primary variations of this pattern. Each one hides the same fear under a different costume. Knowing your costume matters because it tells you how the defense shows up and what small first steps are realistic for you. Which costume are you wearing? I will show you the options next, and you will likely recognize yourself in more than one. The discovery will hurt. It will also be useful. Keep reading. There are 4 ways this denial disguised as virtue shows up most often. Each is a coherent script. Each has its own style of avoidance and its own consequences. The first seems the most innocent. The last is often the most destructive. I will describe each, paint a day in the life, name the belief that runs the show, and then show the predictable life that follows. I do this so you can see yourself clearly. Seeing yourself is the only place to begin. The first variation I meet is what I call the toxic spiritualist. They speak in languages that sound cantorially wise. They quote energy, abundance, and surrender with ease. They have a vocabulary that comforts people around them. They look like someone who has transcended greed. But the day in the life tells a different story. They wake with good intentions. They meditate. They say a mantra about abundance. Then they open the bank app. The numbers make their stomach drop. They tell themselves the numbers are not important. They close the app. They have a friend over and talk about gratitude. They recommend spiritual books. They accept invitations to speak about non-attachment. That same night a credit card bill arrives. They put it in a drawer. They tell themselves that dealing with money lowers their vibration. They take a small pleasure purchase when anxiety spikes. The purchase soothes their chest for an hour. They repeat the pattern. The belief that guides them is simple. Focusing on money will corrupt my spiritual purity. That belief covers a deeper fear of being judged for caring. The logic seems noble, but the consequence is erosive. Over time, the person accumulates debt. They lose opportunities that require administrative competence. They confuse moral superiority with negligence. The life that results is paradoxical. Public acclaim for non-attachment paired with private scarcity and shame. If you recognize this voice in yourself, know this: spiritual language can be a shield. It can also be a lie you tell to avoid practical repair. The second variation reads like a political manifesto. I call it the ideological rebel. They grew up with a set of moral rules about wealth. Maybe a parent told them the rich exploit the poor. Maybe their community framed money as dirty. They internalized the story and made it part of their identity. They dressed their refusal as a protest. A day for them starts with critique. They read a headline about a billionaire purchase and feel righteous anger. They post a thoughtful thread about inequality. They refuse offers that pay well because it would make me complicit. They talk about integrity, but privately they resent the discomfort of small bills. They might take freelance gigs off the grid to avoid labeling. They reject the tools that could help them manage money because those tools feel like selling out. This position gives them moral clarity but practical fragility. The belief at the core is money is inherently corrupting and participating in its systems is morally wrong. That belief protects them from having to negotiate their desire. It also ensures they will repeatedly miss chances to build stable resources. The consequence is that their resentment grows. They become bitter at the success of others. Their scarcity becomes a sign to themselves that they are still right, and the feedback loop continues. If you are the ideological rebel, your moral courage may be real, but it may also be a cordoned identity that keeps you in low resources. The third variation is quieter and often the saddest. I call this one the financially traumatized. This person has lived through humiliations around money. Maybe they watched parents fight over bills. Maybe they were shamed in youth for not being able to pay. Trauma here is not dramatic in every telling. It is many small cuts. The mind responds by building a defense, disavowal. Their day is filled with caution. They avoid discussing salary. They do not ask for raises. They hide their bank statements. They tell themselves, "I don't care," because caring is too painful. When an emergency hits, they freeze. Their body constricts. They prefer to believe that not caring will keep pain away, so they adopt stoic-sounding phrases to survive. The belief is, if I admit this matters, I will feel unbearable loss. That belief is born from survival. It worked to keep them functional in the past, but it also produces chronic underinvestment in their future. The consequences are deep. The person lives with a low baseline of security. They feel unseen. When relationships require transparency, they shut down. They will avoid seeking help because asking feels like admitting failure. That avoidance creates isolation. Over time, the pattern becomes entrenched. If you recognize this variant, the work is gentle but firm. You must learn that admitting you care does not mean. Often the real fear under this is fear of failure. Waiting is a way to delay the risk of being wrong. The consequence is opportunity loss. Offers evaporate. Confidence withers. The paradox is that the universe rewards presence. You cannot be seen for opportunities you are not available to take. Across these four faces of the same pattern, a few truths hold. You can appear above money while being below it in practice. You can adopt spiritual formulas to avoid practical work. You can wear moral outrage like armor. You can bury trauma and hope the wound will close. You can wait for perfect timing and miss the only openings you could get. Let me give you a full-day portrait that mixes two of these types and shows how they interact. I once observed a couple in their 30s who both claimed detachment. One was a toxic spiritualist. The other was a cosmic procrastinator. They had small savings and a growing credit card balance. The spiritualist lectured about not being owned by money. The procrastinator kept promising to get a new client when the energy is right. They both felt virtuous and also terrified. When parenthood arrived as a plan, the tension became physical. They had to choose a path. They were forced to trade narratives for actual steps. They created a simple script: 2 minutes a day, check accounts, and one concrete task each week. The tasks were ridiculous in their simplicity. Call the plumber. Set an appointment with a tax advisor. Send one query email for work. Over months, those small acts rewired their fear. They kept some of their values. Their identity did not melt. Their security improved. That is the point. Change is granular and accretive. Each subtype has a specific doorway to begin shifting. For the toxic spiritualist, the entry is permission. Permission to see money as material that can serve values. For the ideological rebel, the entry is curiosity. Curiosity about how systems work and whether you can use them without compromising your ethics. For the traumatized, the entry is tenderness. Small, visible acts that disconfirm shame. For the procrastinator, the entry is accountability. Commitments anchored to other people and deadlines. Now, notice something crucial. Many people live in more than one subtype. You may be partly a traumatized person who sometimes takes the rebel posture. Identities are not exclusive. They are modular. The mind chooses whichever costume best deflects the immediate threat. That means you can shift one module while another remains active. The work is iterative. I want to offer 2 short stories of transformation because examples tend to move a pattern from idea into possibility. The first involves a man who identified as an ideological rebel. He had built a career in community organizing and had a deep mistrust of wealth. He also had 3 children and a mortgage. When his partner suggested a consulting contract that paid well, he reflexively refused. Later, he discovered the work allowed him to scale his impact. He had to face the idea that participation does not always equal betrayal. He renegotiated his story. He accepted the contract and set clear terms to protect his values. The result was more money and more capacity to fund causes he cared about. The compromise did not feel like selling out. It felt like choosing effectiveness. The second story involves a woman who had been deeply traumatized. She had been ashamed of asking for money help. We started with one tiny action. She set an alarm for 2 minutes in the morning and 1 minute at night to list 3 small financial facts: 1 expense, 1 incoming plan payment, 1 question for a financial advisor. That tiny ritual reduced her cognitive load and made money less monstrous. After 6 months, she negotiated a repayment plan for debt and began to sleep better. She did not become reckless. She became present. Both stories share a practical truth. Small, consistent acts break secrecy. Secrecy maintains the old story. Visibility erodes it. The ritual I gave them was not spiritual bypass or a motivational slogan. It was a tiny training run for your nervous system. It taught them to tolerate the emotions that come with facing money. Tolerance grows into competence. You might be wondering if any of this is true in a cosmic sense. Does the universe respond to your inner state? I answer that by reframing the question. I do not need metaphysical proof to see that consistent inner patterns produce consistent outer behaviors. The universe, in practical terms, means the field of consequences you interact with daily. If your decisions channel avoidance, you will attract scarcity. If your decisions channel attention, you will attract opportunities. This is not mystical. It is consistent. Understanding your subtype matters because it tells you which small first moves will succeed. If you try to force a rebel into a spreadsheet lecture, you will likely increase their resistance. If you demand a traumatized person to tackle a full budget in one session, you will trigger shame and retreat. The wise path is to meet where the person can act without collapsing. Before I finish, I want to be frank. Naming these types is not to shame you. It is to locate the defense so it can be negotiated. You are not a bad person if you hold one of these patterns. You are a human with a strategy that once kept you safe. The question now is whether that strategy keeps you safe today. In the next section, I will explain the single, invisible law that connects all these types. I will show how the same mechanism turns a noble value into a procedural problem. I will show the simplest map of how belief becomes behavior and how the world echoes it back. If you are ready to stop the loop, that explanation is the place you must understand. Are you ready to see the law that explains why the world responds as it does? The next part reveals it. I call the mechanism behind this pattern the law of energetic congruence. It sounds a little lofty. It is practical. It simply says this. The world reflects the energy you consistently emit, not the slogans you repeat to feel virtuous. Your words can be pretty. Your pattern will be louder. Picture the mind as a small radio transmitter. What you broadcast most often becomes the channel you tune to. If your station is fear and avoidance about money, everything you notice, choose, and attract will match that signal. That is the plain architecture of why saying, "I don't care about money," while panicking at the sight of your balance produces the exact opposite of the life you claim to want. The law has a shape. It moves in a predictable loop. Event, meaning, emotion, action, consequence, confirmation. A bill arrives, event. You tell a story that it proves money is corrupt or that you are bad at it, meaning. Your body tightens and the chest tells you to flee, emotion. You either avoid the task or soothe yourself with a purchase, action. A consequence hits late fees, missed opportunity, debt, consequence. The result becomes proof of the original story, confirmation. The loop tightens. I am careful here because I do not mean to moralize. This is not about blame. It is about coherent causality. The mind is a meaning machine. When it stitches a rule money equals danger, it will marshal thoughts and feelings to keep that rule safe. The body prefers the familiar pain over the unknown work of change. So the law is less mystical and more mechanical. It is pattern recognition writ large. Let me show you how this plays out in 3 quick, concrete settings. First, the windfall. Someone gets an unexpected check. The inner script whispers, "I can't keep this. If I let it sit, I'm greedy." The emotional prompt is relief mixed with anxiety. The typical behavior is to spend the check quickly on something that proves, "I am not owned by money." The consequence is no buffer left. The inner script files another receipt. Money leaves me. The universe, if you want to call it that, simply returns what was asked for continued absence. Second, the opportunity. A promotion or new client appears. The internal story asks, "Will taking this change me into someone I despise?" Anxiety appears as moral alarm. The person hesitates, stalls, overanalyzes. The offer expires. The consequence is a smaller income and a vindicating memory. See, it would have compromised me. The belief is reinforced by the result. Third, relationships. A friend offers help. The inner rule screams, "Debt is humiliation." You refuse, or you accept with shame. Either way, you replay the movie where money is judgment. You isolate, resent, and then use your isolation as proof that you were right to be pure. The law of congruence is indifferent. It simply matches your long-running broadcast. You can treat the universe as shorthand for the field of consequences. Notice the cruel efficiency of the law. It does not punish moral failures. It mirrors what you practice. If you practice disdain for money and then avoid the mundane work of managing it, you will reliably produce scarcity. If you practice steady attention to small financial facts, you will reliably produce more options. The distinction is not mystical. It is functional. A final thing about this law I want you to hear. It makes the concept of bad luck optional. Bad luck is often just coherence with a neglected frequency. That is a hard sentence for some. For others, it is liberating. It means you are not helpless before fate. It means your daily choices, small as they are, matter. They are the levers that change what appears in front of you. If you accept the law of energetic congruence, the next question becomes obvious. How does the internal pattern get started and then accelerate? How does a hesitant skip at one bank notification become a decade-long script of scarcity? In the next part 1, we'll show the loop in motion. I will trace the cycle step by step in multiple settings until you can spot the machine running inside you. The next section will make the pattern feel invulnerable and therefore breakable. Are you ready to watch it in action? Here is the cycle rendered in living color. It is a machine with 5 gears spinning together. The gears are denial, avoidance, impulsive relief, consequence, and confirmation. Watch one gear turn and the rest follow. The machine learns. It optimizes for short-term calm. It sacrifices long-term safety. Start with denial. You tell yourself a story that keeps you safe from a feeling. I don't care about money. Is denial wrapped in virtue? Denial lowers the immediate anxiety. It allows you to postpone the work. That postponement feels like morality. It feels like freedom. But it is the first hinge of the loop. Avoidance is the next gear. Because you declared not to care, you skip the monthly review. You ignore the email from the bank. You delay calling the landlord. Each avoidance is a small deposit in the debt of consequences. The body rewards avoidance with short-term relief, and the pattern deepens. Then comes impulsive relief. Anxiety does not dissolve. It squeezes and asks for some release. Many people buy, binge, or consume experiences to soothe that squeeze. The purchase is ritualized as self-care. The bill arrives 3 weeks later, and the relief evaporates. The pattern learns that spending soothes pain. Spending becomes part of the loop. Consequences follow predictably. Late fees, damaged credit, lost credibility. Opportunities evaporate because you were not present to take them. Relationships strain because you hide or lie. Your environment starts to match your inner chaos. That matching is not poetic. It is arithmetic. Finally, confirmation cements the cycle. The events that occur after these choices are taken as proof that your original belief was true. See, money is always gone. The script receives evidence and writes it in permanent ink. The mind relaxes back into denial. The gears turn again. I want to show you this pattern in 3 different scenes to make the mechanics unmistakable. In the first scene, a freelance designer receives an email about a lucrative project. She tells herself aloud, "If I take that, I will have to work like everyone else." She thinks of her identity as unbought. The anxiety about losing identity makes her negotiate poorly and stall. The client hires someone else. She then uses the loss as evidence that the system is rigged. The loop repeats. In the second scene, a man gets a small inheritance check. His immediate impulse is guilt. He remembers a parent saying, "Good people don't get attached to money." He spends half of it on a weekend escape. He tells himself it was a conscious choice. The bills pile up again. The inheritance becomes a vanished test case. He files the memory under, "I can't keep money," and moves on. In the third scene, a woman married to a partner who handles finances avoids asking for clarity. She fears appearing weak. A surprise medical bill hits. She borrows from a friend and feels shame. That shame turns into secrecy. Secrecy becomes isolation. Isolation becomes another proof that money is morally risky. The loop widens. It touches relationships and identity. Each scene ends the same way. The person claims a moral or spiritual posture and then behaves in ways that create scarcity. The repetition makes the machine efficient. You begin to respond not to facts, but to the expectation of a fact. The expectation organizes perception. You see only what fits. This is why education alone rarely breaks the loop. You can learn spreadsheets and still broadcast scarcity. Knowledge without habit is decoration. The emotional habit is the engine. To change outcomes, you must change the engine. You must interrupt the rotation of those 5 gears. How do you interrupt it? You cannot dismantle it with a single thought. That would be wishful. You dismantle it by introducing a counter pattern that is boring and small. You replace denial with naming. You replace avoidance with 2 minutes of attention. You replace impulsive relief with a pause ritual. You replace secrecy with a tiny act of visibility. These are micro-injections of new frequency into your daily life. Let me be specific. Name one recurring belief. If I focus on money, I will lose my purity. Write it down. Say it out loud. Then do one small, visible act. Move $10 into a savings account and record it. 2 minutes. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Just done. Repeat for 30 days. The machine will notice a new frequency. The environment will begin to answer differently. I do not say this lightly. I have watched people try bigger solutions and fail. I have also watched people do trivial acts and transform how the world treats them. The law of congruence does not favor grandness. It favors consistency. One more thing before I close this part. The cycle can move faster when multiple gears are reinforced by social approval. If your tribe praises non-attachment, your denial gets socially lubricated. If your community valorizes martyrdom, avoidance feels honored. That social reinforcement accelerates the loop. The sad irony is that the applause you receive for your creed is often the very force that keeps your bank account in crisis. Now imagine this machine left unchecked for years. What happens if the gears never slow? Where does it lead? The answer is not subtle. The pattern magnifies until something breaks. In the next part, 1 will show that breaking point. I will describe the collapse that forces honesty and the rare awakening that follows. You need to see that moment because it is the doorway. If you do not recognize it, nothing changes. If you do, everything can. Are you ready to meet that fork? The loop will eventually demand payment. Patterns compound. Small neglects become structural weakness. The stress increases. The body and relationships strain. Then a moment arrives that is not negotiable. I call it the point of rupture. It can be a mountain of bills, a health crisis, a partnership fracture, or the arrival of a child. The rupture is blunt. It forces visibility. I watched a woman in her 40s reach this point. She had been the classic spiritualist who refused budgets. One month, she had 3 big expenses collide. Her accounts had 0. She could not borrow. The humiliation of calling a landlord paralyzed her. She felt shame, then fury, then a thin clarity. That clarity was the hinge. She did 2 minutes a day, just 2 minutes logging receipts and noting one question for a financial advisor. Within weeks, the fear had softened. Within a year, she had negotiated debt and taken a consulting job she had earlier declared beneath her. The collapse created permission to care. Collapses work like that. They remove the polite illusions and leave you with facts. Facts are not moral. Facts are reparable. But repair requires admitting responsibility to facts. Here is the fork. You can deny further and make new justifications, or you can accept the pain and learn a new script. Both roads are real. One deepens scarcity. The other opens the narrow door to repair. Most people, predictably, slide toward denial. Denial is easier. It keeps identity intact. It preserves the social applause you earned for your moral stance. It keeps you in a loop that slowly drains life from you. But some people, when hit by rupture, choose differently. They use the shock as leverage. They do not need a perfect plan. They need a sequence of small, visible acts that train their nervous system to tolerate discomfort without fleeing. Let me describe the internal landscape at rupture. There is intense shame. There is grief for missed chances. There is the arrival of a child made the collapse inevitable. They could have doubled down on virtue. Instead, they made a pact. 2 minutes a day, 1 task a week. The smallness saved them. It also saved their relationship. Rupture is not a guarantee of growth. It is an opportunity-laden emergency. Some people use it to become more rigid. Others use it to become more skillful. Here are the psychological moves that separate the two outcomes. The first is accurate naming. Call the problem what it is: avoidance, shame, fear. The second is visible action. Tell someone. Make the first small payment plan. The third is slow repetition. The nervous system learns through frequency. The fourth is identity renegotiation. Allow yourself to be a person who pays attention. I will be blunt. The spiritual language of detachment can be seductive precisely because it often allows people to avoid the messy work. Detachment practiced in denial is denial disguised. Detachment practiced after honest accounting is real skill. The rupture forces the test. Do you want to be free or admired for being free while you starve yourself? At this point you may wonder, what is the exact first act that matters? There is no single universal. There is a family of first acts. One of the smallest and most reliable is visibility. Tell one person the truth about your money for the first time. No drama. A single sentence. I have been avoiding our finances, and that has left me anxious. That sentence does two things. It breaks secrecy. It invites help. It trains your voice to carry truth without collapse. After that, the second act is measurement. Look at numbers for 2 minutes. The 2-minute practice is strategic. It is small enough not to trigger overwhelming shame. It is long enough to be real. Do it daily. Record one observation. Repeat. Within weeks the panic softens. Within months the margins increase. It is not mystical. It is training. Finally, understand that rupture will scare you back into old habits. The old loop has momentum and social incentives. Expect setbacks. When you slip, do not leap to shame. Name the slip. Make one corrective action. The brain learns faster by pattern than by perfection. If you treat mistakes as moral failures, you will refuel the very fear that started the pattern. The rupture is the moment most people dread. But dread is an invitation to choose. If you choose to repair, the work is ugly and boring and humiliating. It also works. If you choose to double down on virtue signaling, the work is easy and the rewards are shame. The choice is yours. In the next section, I will give you the exact template I use with people at rupture. It is simple, 2-minute practice etched into identity. It is not glamorous. It is the antidote to the loop. Are you prepared to try something absurdly small but non-negotiable? I call the new pattern financial presence. It is not a slogan. It is a posture. It means I stop pretending attention equals corruption. It means I stop fetishizing detachment as moral superiority. Instead, I practice being honest with the facts and with my feelings about them. What changes first is language. I stop saying, I don't care about money. I start saying, out loud, I am learning to be present with my money. Say it once, and it sounds trivial. Say it every morning, and it begins to move your nervous system. Words shape attention. Attention trains behavior. The shift must be tiny because the old machine resists. So I prescribe a ritual small enough to be boring and stubborn enough to be non-negotiable. I call it the 2-minute ledger. 2 minutes. No longer. 2 minutes every day, same time. Use a timer. Open one statement. One app. One envelope. Look. Breathe. Name one feeling. Write one line. Observed. Number/reaction. Feeling/next tiny step. Action. Then close the ledger and go on with your day. The practice has 3 psychological aims. First, it converts avoidance into a habit of inspection. Avoidance feeds denial. Inspection starves it. Second, it trains tolerance. 2 minutes teaches your system that you can look without collapsing. Third, it creates a visible breadcrumb trail of competence. You will be surprised how much confidence accrues from small, repeated competence. Let me be explicit about what you do in those 2 minutes. Start the timer. Open your bank app or a single bill. Read one line. Notice the physical sensation in your throat, chest, or gut. Name the feeling out loud. Shame, fear, annoyance. Write one sentence. I will move $10 to savings, or I will email the landlord by Friday. End by saying, in voice, I will be present. Stop. 2 minutes. It is both a stop and a promise. You will object. You will call this trivial. That objection is the point. The old pattern eats the dramatic and spits out paralysis. Smallness bypasses the ego's moral theater. The truth is change happens through frequency, not drama. Frequency rewires expectation. Expectation organizes perception. That is how you change which invitations reality answers. Now the ritual must not be only private. Visibility is part of reprogramming. Secrecy is a lever the old pattern uses. It isolates shame and feeds denial. So add one tiny visible act once a week. Tell one person the truth about one thing. Not a confession, a factual sentence. I checked our account and we have X. I'm doing Y. Visibility does 2 things. It externalizes the pattern and invites reality to respond differently. It also makes secrecy harder to maintain. You must also prepare for sabotage. The old loop will try to reclaim territory. It will offer versions of the same ritual that feel spiritual or glamorous but are functionally avoidance. Meditation in place of accounting. Trusting the universe in place of paying a bill. When that happens, return to the specificity test. Can the action be measured? Does it change a fact? If the answer is no, it is likely consoling ritual, not repair ritual. I want to give you 2 portraits so you feel how this ritual plays out in real lives. The first is Claire. She was the archetypal spiritualized avoider. She posted quotes about abundance and lectured friends about not letting money lead your life. Her credit card arrived with 3 missed payments. The shame turned into secrecy. The 2-minute ledger felt ludicrous to her. She started anyway. 2 minutes at breakfast. 2 minutes at night. She logged the smallest facts. 1 subscription to cancel, 1 recurring charge to query. After 3 weeks, she had enough small corrections to call the company and negotiate a payment plan. She paid 1 creditor. The urgency eased. More importantly, she could say the phrase, I am checking this now, without feeling like she betrayed her identity. That phrase became an anchor. The identity rewired around presence, not virtue. The second is Mark. He was a procrastinator cosmic, always waiting for the opportunity that would make finances irrelevant. He received a modest bonus and blew most of it on an escape. The pattern repeated. At rupture, he finally agreed to the 2-minute ledger because his partner insisted. He started to record 1 observation nightly. He noticed a week where dinners outshrank and savings grew by $40. $40 felt meaningless until he watched it compound with repetition. After 2 months, he had the confidence to pitch a freelance client. He negotiated better pay because he no longer feared being too mercenary. The ritual didn't pay his rent overnight. It softened his reactivity and widened the range of options he could see. Those stories show the mechanism. Small acts, repeated, rewire attention. They also show the social vector. A partner or a friend often converts private practice into accountable reality. Find the person who can receive a small truth without performing judgment. Ask them simply to listen. You don't need a savior. You need a witness. The mental work alongside the ritual is crucial. You must name the belief that organizes the avoidance. For many of you, it will be a sentence like, if I care about money, I will lose my purity. Or, needing money means I'm weak. Write that sentence down. Read it in the morning. Then write a counterstatement. I can care about money and keep my integrity. The counterstatement is not meant to be true instantly. It is intended to become plausible through action. I want to offer 3 micro tools you use during the 2 minutes. First, the query. Ask, what is one fact I can change in 5 minutes or less? Second, the reframe. When shame rises, name it and say, this is shame, not truth. Third, you'll see the smallness accumulate into real freedom. Are you ready to imagine what that life would feel like? Change looks like a series of small, unremarkable shifts that add up until the landscape itself feels different. It does not arrive as a miracle. It arrives as fewer surprises, fewer shames, and a quieter nervous system. The first week is the least dramatic. You do your 2 minutes. You tell one person a small fact. You move $10. You will notice one immediate effect. Your anxiety drops by a sliver. That drop is physiological. Looking decreases threat. You will think, wrongly, that this tiny drop is insignificant. It is not. The system learns in frequency. A small drop repeated daily reduces the amplitude of panic over months. In month 1, you will begin to see micro-decisions change. You will hesitate before impulse purchases. The hesitation is the new competence at work. You will stop defaulting to a story. I'm spiritual. I don't need to worry, and start asking, will this choice keep me present? That question is the hinge. It does the actual reprogramming. 6 months in, the visible results appear. Not dramatic, but substantive. Late fees reduce. You stop needing to ask friends for loans. You find the courage to negotiate a bill. Opportunities you would have declined before are now evaluated with curiosity instead of moral panic. A client offer that would have felt like corruption becomes simply a contract. Your vocabulary around money changes from bad and dirty to tool and resource. I want to paint 2 scenes so you can feel the difference. Scene 1. A couple at their kitchen table. 2 years prior, they would have avoided the table entirely when bills arrived. Now they sit, each with a 2-minute practice log that morning. The conversation is efficient and human. They map priorities. They choose a small, non-heroic solution, postpone a non-essential subscription, and call the utility to ask about a payment plan. They do it together. The shame that once shaped their marriage loses its veto power. The child they have is born into a household with less secrecy. That child learns a different signal about money, that it is spoken of, not shamed. Scene 2. A freelancer who used to decline steady contracts out of fear of losing freedom. After months of 2-minute inspections, she begins to see the gap between ideology and survival. She takes a contract she would previously have judged as selling out. She negotiates terms. She accepts boundaries. The money steadies her, and steadier money buys her the time to do the creative work she actually values. Her identity shifts from being defined by a posture to being defined by practice. Those scenes show the accumulation. They also reveal a deeper truth. The universe responds to patterns, not because of magic, but because of correlation. When you are consistently present, you notice opportunities, you respond differently, and you therefore are in position to receive different results. It is not metaphysical wish. It is selective attention married to small action. But this future is fragile. Old narratives will reappear when stress spikes. A breakup, a health scare, or a professional rejection can revive the ancient scripts overnight. The old machine will whisper that you never really changed. That whisper matters only if you listen. When it comes, return to 2 minutes. Repeat the one tiny visible act. Do not try to solve everything at once. Keep the scale micro. There will also be social friction. Your tribe may have rewarded your previous posture. The applause that praised non-attachment can turn into passive sabotage. People will test the new you. Some will mock. Others will misinterpret your presence as a moral shift away from them. Expect to lose some audiences. That is part of becoming congruent. Your environment will recalibrate to the pattern you emit. If you emit presence, new invitations will look different, and some old ones will fall away. Now the practical. What does your week look like when this future is real? You have 2 minutes in the morning. You glance at one statement. You make one micro decision. Cancel, call, transfer. You tell one person a factual sentence. Once a month you review and mark a small progress item. You schedule one conversation about money with a partner or close friend. Those acts are boring, but they create a scaffolding of competence. I want to address money management without reducing it to spreadsheets. The emotional architecture matters more than any budget template. People who maintain rigid budgets with the same shame loop often fail. What works is a rhythm that can be kept. The ritual must be compatible with your life. If you are chaotic, your ritual must be even smaller. If you are control-oriented, you can expand faster. The key metric is sustainability. Let me be candid about outcomes. You will not become rich because of 2 minutes a day. Richness is a complex variable, but you will reduce the leaks that keep you trapped. You will stop compounding scarcity through secrecy. You will improve credit, sleep better, and regain dignity in relationships. Those are the measurable returns. They are the sort of returns that open new doors. There is also a moral change, subtle but decisive. You will stop using spiritual language as a cloak. You will reserve your spiritual adjectives for interior work that actually transforms your behavior. You will begin to see discipline as ethical, not as compromise. That revaluation alone will alter how you show up in the world. Finally, imagine a version of your life 5 years from now if you keep the pattern. Not perfect, not free of setbacks, but with fewer crises, more options, and less shame. You will be the same person by temperament, but you will have added a skill. You can be present with money. That skill translates into other domains. Emotional honesty, relationship repair, better work choices. Presence is transposable. If this future feels distant, that is normal. The old loop trained you to expect permanence and scarcity. Practice trains you to expect possibility. The next part will pull this all together and give you the minimal next step you can take right now. It will be embarrassingly simple and brutally honest. Choose to try it, or choose to close the tab and keep the machine humming. What will you do? We started with an image. You glance at your balance and close the app as if ignorance could make the problem vanish. That image is a symptom. The diagnosis is deeper, a pattern of denial, avoidance, impulsive relief, consequence, and confirmation. The remedy is not a sermon. It is repetition. It is presence. So here's the thesis again, as plainly as I can say it. Saying you do not care about money while you avoid it is not humility. It is a defense. The energetic request you send to reality is not your speech. It is your steady behavior. The universe, or reality, or the network of cause and effect that constitutes your life, answers to the frequency you maintain. You can change that frequency with tiny acts that accumulate into new expectation. Where do you stand in this story? Ask yourself a set of blunt questions. Do you avoid looking at statements? Do you default to moral explanation when a bill arrives? Do you buy to soothe anxiety? Do you hide or postpone conversations about money with those closest to you? If you answered yes to any of these, you are inside the machine. Naming that is not moral defeat. It is diagnostic clarity. Now the smallest next step. Do it today. Set a 2-minute timer. Open one financial view, an app, an envelope, a single line on a statement. Observe one fact. Name one feeling. Say one sentence out loud. I check this and I will move one small thing. Then take one visible action. Transfer $10 to savings. Send one email. Cancel one recurring charge. Tell one person a one-line truth about it. In the 2 minutes. That is the entire micro protocol. 2 minutes. One visible act. One line to a witness. If you cannot do that, you are not too broken. You are honest about the depth of the avoidance. Begin by telling one person you cannot do it yet. Visibility alone becomes the seed of change. There will be a story in your head that tries to neutralize this. It will say, it's symbolic. It won't change anything. It will whisper, you deserve a break. Hear it. Then do the 2 minutes anyway. Symbols become facts when they are repeated. Repetition is the only thing that rewires the expectation we feed into reality. If you're already doing something like this, ask, Is it sustainable? Is it visible? Is it interrupting avoidance, or is it consoling? Many practices wear the mask of repair while calming anxiety. The practical test is whether your actions change facts. If they do, will you keep turning the gears of denial, or will you press for 2 minutes of presence and see what the world shows you in return?